The small town of Ridgewood had always been a quiet place. The kind of town where people waved at each other from their porches, and the biggest news usually involved a new store opening. That's why the discovery of a severed hand in the town park sent shockwaves through the community. I was walking my dog early that morning when Max, the golden retriever, started barking furiously near a patch of overgrown bushes. At first, I thought it was a squirrel, but then I saw a pale hand sticking out from the dirt, fingers frozen in a claw-like grasp. I stumbled back, my heart racing. Within minutes, the park was swarming with police, and the area was cordoned off. Sheriff Tom Reed, a grizzled man in his 60s, arrived, his face grim. By noon, the hand had been sent to the state lab for analysis. Rumors spread like wildfire. Was it a murder? An accident? Who could it belong to? Ridgewood had never seen anything like this. The next day, the sheriff held a press conference. The hand had been identified as belonging to Allison Blake, a 32-year-old woman who had been missing for 3 weeks. Allison was a single mother, well-liked by everyone in town. Her disappearance had been a mystery, but this discovery made it clear something terrible had happened to her. The sheriff urged calm, but the town was on edge. People locked their doors, kept their children close, and whispered theories over coffee at the diner. I knew Allison's brother, Paul Blake. He was a quiet guy, worked as a mechanic, and kept mostly to himself. When I went to see him at his shop, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. She didn't deserve this, Paul said, his voice shaky. She was just trying to make a better life for her and her kid. Allison's son, Jeremy, was staying with relatives out of town. Paul said he couldn't bear to tell the boy what had happened yet. What do you think happened to her? I asked. Paul hesitated, then said something that sent a chill down my spine. She told me she was scared of someone. She didn't say who, but she said if anything happened to her, it wouldn't be an accident. A week later, a group of hikers found another gruesome clue. A shallow grave in the woods just outside town. Inside were more of Allison's remains, along with her purse and a torn piece of fabric. The sheriff called in the state police to help with the investigation, but the town was growing restless. People wanted answers. I couldn't stop thinking about what Paul had said. If Allison had been scared of someone, who could it have been? She wasn't the kind of person to have enemies. That's when I remembered something. A few weeks before her disappearance, I'd seen her arguing with someone in the parking lot of the grocery store. It was a man tall, wearing a black baseball cap. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it, but now it seemed important. I decided to tell the sheriff what I'd seen. When I told Sheriff Reed about the man in the parking lot, he took it seriously. He asked for every detail I could remember. His height, the color of his clothes, any identifying features. But I didn't have much to go on besides the black baseball cap and his aggressive demeanor. The sheriff decided to check the grocery store's security cameras. It was a long shot, but maybe they'd captured the argument. A day later, Reed called me to his office. We found the footage, he said, sliding a still image across the desk. My stomach dropped. The man arguing with Allison was none other than Rick Hammond, Ridgewood's deputy sheriff and Reed's trusted right-hand man. Rick Hammond had been with the department for over a decade, known for his charm and quick smile. The idea that he could be involved in Allison's death seemed unthinkable. But the footage didn't lie. There he was, towering over her, his face twisted in anger. When confronted, Rick admitted to knowing Allison but claimed the argument was about an unpaid debt. She borrowed money from me, he said. I got upset when she didn't pay it back, but that's all it was. Reed didn't buy it. A search warrant was issued for Rick's home, and what they found changed everything. Hidden in his garage was a bloody shovel and a torn piece of fabric that matched the one found in Allison's grave. Rick was arrested that evening, and the town erupted with shock and disbelief. How could someone who was supposed to protect Ridgewood commit such a heinous crime? At his arraignment, Rick maintained his innocence. The evidence was planted, he said. This is a setup, but his story didn't add up. The lab confirmed that the blood on the shovel matched Allison's DNA. Paul Blake confronted Rick outside the courthouse. "You killed my sister," he shouted, his fists clenched. It took two deputies to hold him back. As the case against Rick seemed airtight, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Rick wasn't exactly the type to meticulously cover his tracks, yet the evidence was almost perfect. That's when I decided to dig into Rick's personal life. I learned that he'd recently started dating a woman named Carla, who worked as a waitress at the local diner. When I asked Carla about Rick, her face went pale. "I don't know anything about Allison," she stammered. "I don't want to get involved." Her reaction told me she was hiding something. A few days later, I ran into Carla again, this time at the grocery store. She looked nervous, constantly glancing over her shoulder. "I need to talk to you," she whispered, pulling me aside. "But not here." We met later at a park outside town. Carla was shaking as she spoke. "Rick didn't kill Allison," she said. "I know because he was with me the night she disappeared." Her words hit like a lightning bolt. If Rick had an alibi, why hadn't he mentioned it? And if he didn't kill Allison, who did? Carla's revelation left me more confused than ever. If Rick was innocent, someone had gone to great lengths to frame him. But who and why? I pressed Carla for more details. "Why didn't Rick say anything about being with you that night?" She hesitated, then admitted he was afraid it would ruin his reputation. "We weren't exactly public about our relationship." I told Sheriff Reed about Carla's alibi. He seemed skeptical but agreed to look into it. Meanwhile, I started digging into Allison's life, hoping to find a clue everyone else had missed. My search led me to Allison's neighbor, a retired teacher named Mrs. Grayson. She recalled seeing Allison arguing with another man shortly before her disappearance. He was younger, Mrs. Grayson said. Wore a suit, had a briefcase, looked like some kind of businessman. A businessman that didn't match anyone we knew. I checked Allison's phone records and found several calls to a number registered to a Jason Mills, a real estate developer from the next town over. When I confronted Jason, he denied knowing Allison at first, but under pressure, he admitted they'd been having an affair. Jason claimed the affair was short-lived and ended amicably, but something about his demeanor felt off. When I asked him where he was the night Allison disappeared, he fumbled for an answer. "I was at home," he finally said. Alone, Sheriff Reed wasn't convinced. A search of Jason's car turned up a damning piece of evidence, a single earring that matched a set Allison often wore. Jason was brought in for questioning, and the cracks in his story began to show. Jason confessed to the affair, but insisted he didn't kill Allison. "She called me that night, scared out of her mind," he said. She said someone was following her, but Jason's DNA was found under Allison's fingernails, and witnesses placed his car near the woods the night she vanished. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Jason finally broke down. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that," he sobbed. "We fought, and she fell. I panicked." His confession painted a picture of an argument gone horribly wrong. But something still didn't sit right with me. Late one night, I went back to the park where Allison's hand was first discovered. Something about the location bothered me. Why bury her in two different places? That's when I noticed the faint remains of tire tracks leading into the woods. Following the trail, I found a hidden cabin. Inside, I uncovered a stash of money, fake IDs, and a journal. The journal was Allison's. It detailed her affair with Jason, but also mentioned a larger scheme. Jason was laundering money for a criminal organization, and Allison had uncovered his secret. Jason hadn't just killed Allison in a fit of rage. He silenced her to protect his operation. With the journal as evidence, the FBI was called in, and Jason's criminal empire crumbled. Rick Hammond was released and publicly exonerated, though his reputation took time to rebuild. Sheriff Reed stepped down, ashamed of how the case had been mishandled. As for Ridgewood, the town slowly healed, though the memory of Allison's tragic death lingered. Her bravery in exposing Jason's crimes became a symbol of justice, a reminder that even in the darkest times, the truth must come to light,